Hey everybody, it's Anna and welcome back to my booktube channel. This video is going to be my Geekly Wrap-Up for the week of March 9th through March 15th. That was our second week since we've gone into self-isolation and or maybe now quarantine over COVID-19, the coronavirus. So I actually spent a lot of time reading, but because of my anxiety about this whole pandemic situation, my concentration was really fractured. So I didn't actually finish a lot of books, even though I spent a lot of time just reading and trying to take good care of myself and my husband and our dogs and our, emotional and physical health during this very stressful time. So this week I actually finished reading 2 books, 2 graphic novels, and I played 3 board games. The first book that I read was The Guinevere Deception by Kirsten White. I actually didn't realize that I had read something by Kirsten White before, but she wrote the Andi Darkin duology, which is like a historical reimagining of the character of Vlad the Impaler, but if Vlad were a woman. And this is kind of her take on the dark Arthurian legends. I read this as part of the Myth Take book club for February-March. This was a retelling of the King Arthur story that Ashley and Charlotte had picked out for the book club. And I really did not like this book. I almost DNF'd it. If I hadn't been reading it for a book group, I almost certainly would have DNF'd it, but I felt like it was my responsibility to see this through to the end. And this has us follow Guinevere, which is not her real name, but she is somebody that has replaced the actual Guinevere, who dies as a teenager, and she goes to be married to King Arthur and live in his court and basically be kind of a spy, but also kind of his protector, because there is this character called the Dark Queen that represents the forces of magic and chaos that are trying to destroy Camelot. And it's just all very vague. For most of the book, we have the main character, Guinevere, but not really, just saying all of these things oh, I have this secret that could never be revealed, and this secret, and it's just too dark, and I just can't remember it, and I can't tell you anything about it, and it's just then why are we writing this book? I'm wondering if this isn't just falling into the trap of turning something into a YA fantasy trilogy when it doesn't really need to be a trilogy, because it really just felt like this book was marking time until it actually got to the good stuff at the very end, and then it kind of just rushed to wrap up the entire thing. So I was not a fan of this. I don't think I'm going to be continuing with the series, and I ended up giving it 2 out of 5 stars. Next, I got some book mail, which is great because our public libraries have all closed down for the foreseeable future because of the virus. So I read That Can Be Arranged, A Muslim Love Story by Huda Fahmy, and this is a graphic memoir by the author of the Slice of Life comic Yes, I'm Hot in This, and that is her comic about the daily life of being a Muslim woman, visibly Muslim, who wears the hijab in America. And this is about her love story of meeting her husband, Jihad, at this conference, and how she had all of these ideas about what dating and romance was going to be like, and how that matched with her family's cultural expectations, where there are a lot of rules and rituals and a lot of there's a lot of proprietary courtship stuff that she has to go through whenever she wants to maybe be interested in dating somebody. All of her dates have to be chaperoned, usually by her mom or another woman relative, and there I guess are rules about, for really observant Muslims, not touching people of different genders unless you are married to them or related to them and stuff like that. So I thought that this was a really interesting story. It was definitely different from her comics, because she has these bits where she'll just write things and kind of illustrate what she's written. I really loved her take on the reading Jane Austen in college and the similarities between the Jane Austen stories and dating as an observant Muslim. And I ended up giving this 4 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed it. I think everybody should read it, and it was a lot of fun. Then, in order to kind of stave off the blues from Comic-Con being postponed, I read Prose and Comic-Cons, which is a comics and prose anthology about Comic-Cons and the people that love them. And this has a lot of big names from the comics world that contributed to it. It mostly focuses around San Diego Comic-Con, which I have never attended, so like some of the stories were about really specific things to do with that con, and I just don't think I like got it as much because I've never been there, but I still really enjoyed this collection. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars, and it really helped scratch the itch that I was having from like really missing the chance to get together with a bunch of geeky friends this weekend. All right, and then late last night, I finished my last book of the week, which is me trying to get caught up on my backlog of Book of the Month books, and that is Bringing Down the Duke by Evie Dunmore. This is the first in a series called A League of Extraordinary Women, and it is a romance series about suffragettes in England in the 1880s, which kind of was like surprising to me because I forgot that the suffrage movement and like women getting the right to vote happened so much earlier in the UK than it did in the United States. So I was like, wait a second, what? They're getting the right to vote, huh? It was just funny. And this is the story of Annabelle Archer, who is a young suffragette who is also one of the first women to ever be admitted to Oxford University. And one day while she is handing out these suffrage pamphlets, she ends up giving one of them to the Duke of Montgomery, who of course ends up being her love interest, and he just so happens to have this reputation as like a formidably icy politician. He's a Tory that Queen Victoria can pretty much always count on to uphold like the royalist and conservative ideals in the Parliament, but he suddenly finds himself falling for her, and she has feelings for him too, but is not sure how it's going to work out because they have totally different social stations and politics and beliefs and ideas. And I thought that this was a really good portrayal of how being in a relationship can sometimes change people for the better. Like, I don't personally think that you should ever get into a relationship hoping that it will change you, but I think that this is a good examination of the kind of natural changes that happen when you go through a relationship. One of the things that kind of did make me mad at the end of this book, though, was there's a whole subplot that takes place that is basically where, like, Montgomery tries to get Annabelle to agree to be his mistress as a way for them to be together, but kind of circumvent the scandal that it would cause if they actually did get married. And then she gets a proposal from this other guy who is societally a more suitable match for her, and she's thinking about accepting him because she doesn't really have that many other options, like she's going to be homeless and have no place to go if she doesn't say yes to him. And Montgomery says, if you marry him, you'll be more of a whore than you ever would be if you had been my mistress. And I know that that was something that, like, was said in anger, and that's not what the character really believes, but I was just like, come on, really? Like, you understand this is how the situation is. You know it's not her fault that, like, women have limited options here. Don't be a dick. So that kind of annoyed me, the fact that he was just like, ooh, you'll be a whore if you marry him. And I was like, I don't like this. I don't like the double standard, even in fiction, even in a lover's tiff. I really don't like it. But other than that, I really enjoyed the book. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars, and I'm definitely going to continue reading with the series. One of the things that I'm growing to love about romance novels is the fact that they inevitably turn into series and spin-offs and such with, like, different side characters and stuff like that. So if you're interested, the second book, which is called A Rogue of One's Own, is coming out in early September of 2020. All right. Then we had a bit of a social distancing board game night, which was really delightful, with Cece from Problems of a Book Nerd and her roommate Brian. If you're on BookTube, you have probably seen their videos already, but we had a really good time just chatting, hanging out, and playing some board games. So we played a couple that I have played before and talked about. We played the good old-fashioned Wavelength, which is the game where you have to give clues that lie along a spectrum between one extreme and the other, and you are trying to basically get the other team to guess where along that spectrum your clue lies. There's a competitive mode to playing this. We just played it, like, just to see what kind of weird and wacky conversations came out of this. I think my favorite one was we had to decide between sexy animals and unsexy animals, and the clue that Cece gave was horses, and we just got into this, like, really lively conversation about, along the spectrum of sexiness, how sexy is a horse, which was really just funny to talk about because that's weird and ridiculous. We also played Letter Jam, which if you watched my Shucks 2019 video, you'll know this was my nemesis because it destroyed me when I was playing it exhausted at the convention. And this is another cooperative game that revolves around players working together to guess letters that they have been given as part of a scrambled up word. And you basically go through taking turns being able to see everybody else's letters but your own. So you spell a bunch of words and you're able to like deduce based off of letter frequency and the way that words are spelled what letters you have. Then you have to unscramble your scrambled letters into a real word. We didn't do great at this game. This is a really difficult game, even when you are playing with people, you know, like the four of us, that we are all very wordy people and like brain teasery type stuff. But this game is hard because words are hard and they need things like vowels to make sense. So sometimes you get stuck like I was, where every time I would only be able to visibly see consonants. And I'm like, I'm sorry guys, I can't give any clues because I literally cannot make a real word just looking at what I have. And there are ways to refresh that throughout the game. I think I just got really unlucky. But this game is also kind of fun when you just sort of get to the point where you're like tearing your hair out in frustration because you're like, I can't spell anything. Is this a word? What do words even mean anymore? So I definitely had a lot of fun revisiting that, even though I apparently am just not the best at this game. And then they introduced us to Batman Flux. Flux is a card game that starts out with very simple draw one, play one rules, and then gradually, as people begin to play cards, they add new rules to the game, new win conditions to the game, and it is just like wild, chaotic, and short, and it comes in a bajillion different flavors. So there's Star Trek Flux, there's Batman Flux, there's Adventure Time Flux, there's Flux with every conceivable possible theme. And despite having sold a bunch of copies of the game in my time working at like retail shops that did that, I actually had never played Flux before. So playing Batman Flux was really cool. It was illustrated with all the Batman the Animated Series stuff, so definitely if you're a fan of that show, I think you'd probably like it. The game is a little too random, I think, for it to ever become a game that I love, but it's definitely just like a fun way to pass the time. So if you're just looking for like a very quick, easy to teach, enjoyable card game, that's Flux for you. And that is going to do it for this past week. We will see when I check in at the start of the third week of our quarantine how we are all doing. As I said before, our libraries have closed down, which is really sad and feels so much more world-ending than it has any right to be, but I think we're doing our best to keep our spirits up, and this is also just to me, from me to you, an exhortation to, if you are able and you have the means, still go out and like support authors and buy authors' books if you can. This pandemic is hitting everybody really hard, but it's hitting authors and creatives, especially folks who are debuting new work this year, especially hard because book tours are being canceled and everything that they would normally be able to do to promote their books has been postponed. So if you can, go out and support those authors that you have always been meaning to pre-order their books and such. I know that a lot of bookstores, local to me anyways, are offering free shipping for the duration of this whole pandemic thing, however long it lasts. So if you can, buy from your local indie, and if you can't, that's okay. Just, retweets, all of that stuff, like spreading the word, everything is appreciated by authors and creatives. So, if you have made it this far to the end of the video and have not been scared away by my residence in the plague capital of the United States, go ahead and subscribe to this channel because that is the best way to get updates on books, pop culture, and now best ways to entertain yourself during self-isolation periods. As always, thank you all so much for watching. I will see you in the next one. Stay as safe and healthy as you can, and I'll talk to you very soon. Bye.